Once upon a time, there was an artist who lived in the countryside. One day, someone presented one of the artist's paintings to the king, who was awed by the painting and wished to meet the artist. The artist went to see the king, who told the artist, "I have a task for you. I want you to paint the portrait of a young boy. I want you to capture the innocence that only a child has." The artist found the perfect boy and spent weeks painting his portrait. He took the portrait of the child to the king, who was very pleased with it and rewarded the artist handsomely. 30 years passed, and the artist became an old man. One day he received another invitation from the palace. When he met the king said, "I want you to paint a hardcore criminal. I want you to capture his cruelty and wickedness." The artist went to a prison where he saw dozens of men and finally found one who had evil written all over his face. Once the artist had begun the painting, the man asked him, "Don't you remember me? 30 years ago, you painted me as the picture of innocence. Today, you are painting me as the worst of mankind. How did this happen? What went wrong?" The artist replied, "Your life is nothing more than the sum of choices you have made. Your mind is a powerful tool, giving you the choice to do good or to do bad. You chose your path." The artist finished his painting, and the following day, the man was hanged. Moral of the story: our mind is a very powerful tool. Like all tools, you have to learn to use this tool effectively. It can take you to your goal, or it can destroy your life. Critical thinking teaches us how to use our mind as a tool to improve our lives.
Every single day, there are numerous attempts to persuade you to buy a product, to use a service, to accept a certain point of view or a certain point of understanding that the other party wants you to adopt. We have numerous accounts of this happening every single day. But before you can accept a particular argument or suggestion, you need to be convinced that the reasons for accepting it are rational, logical, and make sense. You will examine the reasons to see whether you should accept the argument or reject it. And this acceptance or rejection is totally based on the strengths or the weaknesses of the reasons. Yet you find that in many arguments, the reasoning is flawed. There are errors in the reasons that are presented to you. And it's very easy to fall victim to these reasoning flaws. This chart summarizes what we have been discussing in the previous episodes and what we will be covering in this episode. In any attempt to persuade, you have reasons, you have assumptions, and you have the final conclusion that is telling you to do something. In previous episodes, we have looked at the different types of reasons and what you need to look out for. In this episode, we will be focusing on the first type of reasoning error or reasoning flaw that's called irrelevant appeals. An appeal that is made to you to accept a certain argument, but the basis of that appeal is not at all relevant. There are 4 kinds of irrelevant appeals. The first one is appeal to authority. The second, appeal to popularity. The third, appeal to tradition. And lastly, appeal to history. In this episode, we will look at all 4 irrelevant appeals that form one of the reasoning flaws that we see very often in the world today. An appeal to authority is where the basis or the reasoning, the strength of the reasoning is linked back to a particular person, an authority in that field. Let's look at a few historical examples. Marconi invented the radio. When he invented the radio, as the inventor of the radio, he said that people will use radio to talk to one another. Not to listen to music, not to listen to the news, but to talk to one another. That was the inventor of the radio, Marconi, saying that. Let's look at another example. Warner Brothers, a very famous Hollywood company. One of the founders of Warner Brothers, Harry M. Warner, said, "Who wants to hear actors talk? In movies, the audience doesn't want to hear actors talk." He was an authority in his field, yet he got it wrong. Just like Marconi, who got it wrong when he said that the radio will be used for people to talk to each other, not to listen to music. Authorities, people who are experts in their field, can very often be wrong. Look at this person. He was one of the founders of IBM Computers. Thomas Watson Sr., president of IBM Computers. He went on record to say, "I think IBM will be able to sell 5 computers worldwide." 5 computers worldwide. The president of one of the largest computer companies. The point that we are trying to get across here is that just because a person is an expert or an authority in a certain field, it does not make him right.
Our life is what our thoughts make of it.
Let's see how an irrelevant appeal to authority works. Let's look at this example. It says that sugar is not bad for your health. After all, the president of the Medical Council has said that there is no harm in consuming sugar through drinks and food. Now, this is a news report saying that the president of the Medical Council, that governs all the doctors and people in the health industry, the president is saying there is no issue with consuming too much sugar, no problem at all. Now, this man is an authority in the field. Do we take his evidence? Do we believe his statement? Or do we not? Now, just because he has said it does not make it true unless there are reasons to back up his claim. Quoting an authority or an expert is not the basis for accepting an argument. Do not allow yourself to be persuaded just because an expert or an authority in the field says so, unless he can prove his claim by giving you reasons. Because remember, the view expressed by an expert, an authority, may be his personal opinion, personal view. That's all it could be. For example, second example, let's look at this news report that says, "Drinking tea is bad for your health. Ask the Minister of Health. He will tell you so." Now this sounds very authoritative. Minister of Health saying drinking tea is bad for you. Now, does it mean that if in this example an authority has been quoted, you should believe it? No. You have to ask, where is the evidence? What are the reasons? Where are the reasons? How can you accept or reject an argument on the basis of what one person says? You cannot. Because, as we have said, the authority may be expressing his opinion, or he may have been misquoted. He may have said one particular thing, but having been reported to say something totally different. He may have been misreported, misquoted, or he may have been just plain wrong. Authorities are human beings. Experts are human beings. They make mistakes like you and I. What we have to do is we have to look at the evidence instead. Let's go back to the sugar example. The report on the left is what we saw just now. The report on the right is a more complete report of what the President of the Medical Council actually said. A lot of information was left out in the initial report that we saw. When you look at the report on the right, it actually says that the findings of the study show that sugar is not as bad as we thought previously. Now, he doesn't say that sugar is fine. He doesn't say there is no harm in consuming sugar. What he actually says is it's not as bad as we thought. The two reports are very different. In one, he has been misquoted. When you compare his original statement with what's been reported, you find that they are two different things. So can you rely on a report that you read quoting an expert or an authority? You can't. Take the second example that we looked at just now about drinking tea. Left, you see the report that was presented earlier. On the right, you see what the minister actually said. He said that he believes drinking tea is bad for your health because he believes his mother died from drinking too much tea. Now, what does that mean? The minister is expressing his personal opinion. That's his personal belief. He has all the right to do so. It is not enough for us to base our judgment on his personal belief. An expert's personal opinion is his own. So when you are given an argument to evaluate, when someone is trying to persuade you on the basis of what an expert said or what an authority figure said, question it. Is it what he actually said? Has he been misquoted? Is he expressing his personal belief?
A little knowledge that acts is worth infinitely more than knowledge that is idle.
The second kind of irrelevant appeal is when you are persuaded to do something because it is the popular opinion of everyone else. Because it's popular opinion, you should do it too. But just because something is a popular opinion does not mean that it is correct. Let's go back into history. For thousands of years, mankind believed that the world was flat. That was the popular belief. The entire population, human population on Earth, believed that the world was flat. Did it make that belief right just because it was popular? Of course not. Just like that, for thousands of years, we believed that the Earth, our Earth, was at the center of the solar system, our solar system. In 1473, Copernicus showed mathematically that the sun is in the center of our solar system. He went against popular belief. And of course, nobody paid any attention to him in the beginning until they saw the evidence. Just because something is a popular belief does not make it right. Look at what happened in ancient Rome. For thousands of years, Romans believed that man cannot run 1 mile in less than 4 minutes. Romans tried to do this for a very long time, trying to run a distance of 1 mile in less than 4 minutes. Some of the ancient doctors at that time even provided medical evidence to show that the human body has not been designed to do it. It cannot be done. The experts said it cannot be done. On the 6th of May, 1954, a young man named Roger Bannister, you see him in the photograph here, Roger Bannister ran 1 mile in less than 4 minutes in Oxford, England, watched by 3,000 spectators. What was popular belief for thousands of years was shattered. And suddenly, dozens of people were running 1 mile in less than 4 minutes. Just because something is popular does not make it right. This is a reasoning flaw. So remember, just because something is a popular belief, you should not be persuaded to do it. You should be persuaded if there are the right reasons to do it. If the owner of a cake shop is trying to persuade you to buy a large cake for a birthday party by saying, "That's the popular thing to do. This is what everybody else does. Have a great cake." Should you be persuaded? Ask yourself. If someone else tells you, you should really get a 9 to 5 job. That is the popular way of doing things. Most people don't respect workers who are not working 9 to 5 office hours. That is the popular belief. Should you be persuaded? Ask yourself. If your friends tell you, Mr. Chong is a horrible teacher, everybody thinks so. That's the popular opinion of all our classmates. Should you be persuaded? You be the judge. The third type of irrelevant appeal is one to tradition, where someone is trying to persuade you to do something because that is the tradition. Take this example, where a farmer says, "For generations, we have been farming using traditional methods. Why do we need modern equipment?" Now, the argument here is we don't need modern equipment because we have been using the old equipment and the old way of doing things for generations. That is our tradition. Do you accept an argument based on tradition? Next example. The man in the family says, "It's our family tradition to use these herbs to cure fever. We do not need doctors. That is not our tradition." Do you get persuaded based on tradition? No. Take the third example. In a company, in a corporate office, a senior manager says, "Our company tradition is to promote internal people and not bring in outsiders for senior jobs." Do you accept that reasoning based on the reason given, which is we do something or we do not do something because it's our tradition? No, we do not. Whenever someone uses tradition as a reason to persuade you to do something, that person is showing one thing: a resistance to change. Whenever someone does not want to change, he or she relies on tradition. Tradition does not address the real issue. Whenever somebody appeals to tradition, he's not answering the real question. He's avoiding the real question. We have to detect an irrelevant appeal to tradition in any attempt to persuade us. Other forms of statements where tradition is used are statements like, "This is not what we do." That is an appeal to tradition. When somebody says that, "This is not what we do," or when someone says, "This is the way things have been done around here for years, we should not change. Why should we change?" That's an appeal to tradition. That is not a valid reason to accept or reject an argument. So remember, you should accept or reject any attempt to persuade you based on reasons, not based on traditions. The last form of an irrelevant appeal is one to history, where someone uses history as the reason to persuade you to accept or reject an argument. by saying something like, if something has always happened in the past, it will continue to happen in the future. You are relying on history to predict the future. However, the past or the history is not a reliable guide to the future. You can't tell the future by looking at the history. Let's take this example, where someone says, our teacher has used this particular exam format for the last 5 years. She will definitely use it again this year around. Now, this person is using history as a basis of trying to predict the future. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Whenever there is an attempt to persuade you based on just history alone, it is not sufficient. There have to be other reasons before you can accept or reject the argument. Another example. A business person says, I don't want you to change anything. We have been following this method since we started business. Same argument. History. Since we started business. That's how we will continue, as we have done in the past. History is not a guide to the future. When you appeal to history, things that have been done wrong in the past will be repeated into the future. There will be no changes. There can be no changes if you are doing things based on history. Therefore, what we need are reasons. Reasons when someone is trying to persuade us. And neither history nor tradition are strong enough reasons. Now let's review what we have covered in this episode. We have looked at attempts to persuade you. We have looked at the components when someone is trying to persuade you. In his persuasion, there are reasons, there are assumptions, and there is a conclusion. In previous episodes, we have looked at the form that reasons take, how reasons appear to you. In this episode, we have looked at one reasoning error or reasoning flaw, and that's called irrelevant appeals. There are 4 kinds of irrelevant appeals. The first is when you are being persuaded to do something because an expert or an authority says so. The second type of appeal is based on popularity, when you are told to accept a certain point of view because it is the popular opinion. The third is when there is an appeal to tradition. This is the way we have always done things. Therefore, you too should do them the same way. An attempt to persuade you based on tradition. And fourth is an attempt to persuade you based on history, what has been done over the years. Irrelevant appeals are a reasoning error, and you need to look out for this whenever someone is trying to sell you a product or trying to convince you to do something.